Coming up on Avant Technology Insights with Ken Presti.
We're discussing sending all of our employees home. I'm not sure our phone system can handle it.
Companies all over the world are trying to figure out how to remain profitable and productive while still keeping their employees, customers, and partners safe amidst a global pandemic that dominates the news and is putting some of us on lockdown. In today's episode, we talk about how to get our heads around a mobile workforce, both technologically and interpersonally. Welcome to Avant Technology Insights. I'm your host, Ken Presti. The link between solving business challenges and cutting-edge technologies has become tighter and more complex than ever before. In this podcast series from Avant Research and Analytics, we help enterprise decision makers sort through the business case, the value, the challenges, and ultimately the bottom line of technology adoption. So listen to us at your desktop, take us in the car, tune in from the commuter train, or download us at the gate. You'll find us on Apple, Spotify, and Google, as well as in 19 countries across the globe. Okay, so Dan Harrison, president of Upfront Technologies in Denver, Colorado. We are in the midst of a pandemic as designated by the World Health Organization. So we've seen a lot of conferences get canceled. We've seen companies, even schools and churches, temporarily closing their door as a result of all this. What do you see happening in the tech industry as this unfolds, especially as pertains to remote workers?
Oh gosh, that's there's a lot going on there. Yeah, I guess I want to start off by saying I am not a pandemic expert by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
I've been in technology for close to 20 years now, but pandemics are not my they're not my jam. Thankfully, I feel pretty good about that.
I
Um,
understand.
but from a technology perspective, remote work is obviously the driver right now. Everything from the stack, from your meeting protocols down through your remote access to phone, remote access to software, all the way into desktop as a service and infrastructure as a service. The whole stack is being, if it's not already moved into the cloud, people are scrambling to move there now.
So, given what's going on and recognizing that neither one of us are healthcare experts or, disease specialists of any kind, what is happening on the technology side of it? You mentioned a few areas where where you see some growth there, but give me a sense of how much is your phone ringing more than it used to, or are you getting more different types of contacts saying, hey, we're looking at different options and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. Can you help us out? How are things different this week as opposed to the way they were a month ago?
Oh gosh, I would say it's wholesale different. I'm seeing a really bifurcated conversation going on. On one hand, it's all bets are off, all things are dead stop until we figure out what's going on. The other side of it is we need help, and we need help right now. A bunch of my clients have called this week to say, that project that's been on hold for the last year and a half while you told me that we need to do this, well, we need to do it now. Things have really, the heat has turned up in terms of, I think the easiest one to point to is probably UCAS hosted PBX. Folks that had those phone systems that they were either waiting to die or were just kind of dealing with it as it was, are realizing as they're sending employees home that they're not equipped to deal with it. I've had no less than 10 companies call me this week saying, hey, we're discussing sending all of our employees home. I'm not sure our phone system can handle it.
So when they're starting to look at that as a possible solution, just locking the doors and letting everyone work from home, what are the key things that they need to take into consideration before they turn that lock?
Oof, there's a few things. It's not as simple as just throw a phone home with somebody and they're good to go.
Hmm.
There's a few things, from your traditional telecom telephony conversations of porting numbers, but probably more importantly, you're now dealing with variable bandwidth and variable situations. So whereas before you could lock yourself into a conference room and know you had excellent connectivity and absolute silence and no one was going to disturb you, your employees and your management team even are now at home or in varying places around where you don't control the bandwidth, you don't control the background, and you don't control the distractions. Um, so I think one of the big things is, I think probably the step one is to have all of your employees conduct a speed test at their home.
Hmm.
In this day and age, there's not a lot of places that don't have the bandwidth necessary, but basically you're just going to want to have them either print or email you that report, or your IT director that report, so they have the bandwidth necessary, that it isn't flappy, that it is working well enough to run voice and hopefully video from as well.
And
If not,
and if go ahead,
sorry.
and if I'm sorry, if they don't, then I guess they need to take up residence in a coffee shop somewhere for the foreseeable future or something like that. Or is there something that you think most companies would be willing to do in order to augment that bandwidth and build up that level of connectivity that they need?
Well, the short answer is I don't think the coffee shop is the answer in general. Uh, the longer answer is how much are you willing to invest in that? It's still not particularly expensive, but you can do failover at a very, very reasonable price point these days. When you start looking at SD-WAN services, it really smooths out those typically residential services. So you can now get an inexpensive CLEC DSL and an inexpensive MSO coax, a cable-based coax, and stitch them together with an SD-WAN. Now you have a very seamless transportation package that's going to give you a much more robust offering.
So
Another option.
does that
Sorry.
SD, I'm sorry, let me just ask one quick one. Does that SD-WAN solution live at the office site, or is this some sort of an SD-WAN at the customer premise, at the employee premise?
Typically, that's going to be at the employee premise. There, I, I believe there are remote options, none that I feel really great about at this point. So in my opinion, and I'm sure there's somebody that holds a different one as well, but in my opinion, um, the only ones that I know of that work well are prem based. So they are going to be on the customer site for that. Another option, less expensive, would be to just upgrade the customer to a business class internet service. So for using Comcast as an example, their home based service is more like $40 or $50, and their office based service is like $70 or $80 for that 50 meg. So it's an upgrade, and it'll certainly help, but it's still coax based service at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Um, Yet another option is, I know the only one that I know does this for a fact is Comcast, but they will actually give you a coax based point to point that goes through your existing coax.
Hmm.
So that's also an option to get a more robust connection. The
S-
last option is to bring fiber to the home if it's an important enough employee.
That's a huge investment right there.
It can be, but not necessarily either. At this point, depending on where they live and what they have going on, it can be an enormous investment. It can be just a stunning investment of money, but it also can be a commitment of a couple to a few $100s a month.
Hmm.
Again, it's certainly not the first, second, or even third option, but it is something to consider as you're going through it. Again, depending on how important that employee's connectivity is. And again, going back to that coffee shop example, you know, with more and more remote working, even going to a place like Galvanize here in Denver or WeWork or any of those, you're still going into an office at that point. You're kind of defeating the purpose of social distancing.
Right.
So the idea is to not be as close physically to larger groups of people.
This is going to be really weird. It's just just the
Oh my
thought
gosh.
of, I mean, I've been barricaded in my house all week, and I'm working and I'm getting done the things that I need to get done. And I'm probably not like the most hyper social person you're ever going to meet. So on the one
Hmm.
hand, that doesn't often bother me, but I do like to get out and socialize. I do like to go downtown to visit my colleagues at the office and have a little bit of
Hmm.
social time. It's going to be very strange.
I mean, it's already really strange, man. I think we're in for some really interesting changes in the next few weeks to a few months. I'm really hoping that we're really talking about 4 to 6 weeks, not 4 to 6 months.
I hope so too.
Uh, but we also need to, this social distancing actually is going to draw out the overall timeline while making it so our health systems can actually keep up.
Right.
But that does mean, look, to your point, I'm right on that introvert extrovert scale. I'm right
Right.
kind of square in the middle. People don't believe it because I'm pretty darn gregarious, but 100%, like I feel real comfortable. I've worked from home for 9 years. I feel great working from home. That
As do
being
I.
said, I also would take, as part of it, I would take breaks that I would go out and go to a coffee shop for an hour or two to get, just to get my fill of some people.
But there's
And
people there, so that's a different story now, isn't it?
exactly. Or going out to lunch with my clients and my vendors. Um, those are, at least in the short term, are a little bit off the table.
Hmm.
Or they might be off the table. I think we're getting differing views as to whether though you should or shouldn't do it. So it's a lot harder. And I think you bring up a really interesting point on that of as we're going through this, we're going to need that connection.
Hmm.
And it is a conversation of how do you maintain that connection? How do you maintain the culture of your company, for instance,
Yeah, that was
while
actually
doing
one of
this?
the things that we were talking about at our own office, and we're talking about having little video calls for 15 minutes a couple times a week, and just being able to socialize with one another for a while. I'm, kind of a planned spontaneity situation, if you will. But
Yeah,
do you see video as becoming more important as a result of all this?
I think it's essential. To your point, I don't think a couple of times a week is enough. Um, I would argue that best practices for true remote workforce is a 10 to 15 minute, either team wide or company wide, depending on how big your organization is, stand up meeting where everyone is required to have their video
Mhm. And that's
on.
just the thing. I mean, everybody's got video capability these days, but a lot of people don't turn it on. I mean, I don't turn it on right now because I'm probably, if I'm working from home, I'm probably sitting there wearing a sweatshirt or something, and because I'm not thinking about getting dressed for work when I'm in my home office. But
Yeah,
it's different now.
yeah. Nobody does. I mean, I was just on a Zoom call right before this, and nobody had our video. Where there were four of us, nobody had our video turned on.
Hmm.
I recommended that we do because, hey, I personally literally haven't seen another human being in 2 days. I'd love to see somebody's face. So we all turned our video on. And I think that is going to be the norms have to be changed a little bit on that front as we are, in this place of distancing ourselves, of saying,
Right.
hey guys, let's turn our video on. I don't care if you're in your sweats.
Hmm.
Or whatever your norm at your organization is. If your norm is, hey, every video call your video is on and you're wearing a suit, go get it done. More power to you, whatever you need.
Right.
But I do think in this time where we're not going to be seeing as many people, seeing faces, even if it's on video, is really really important.
Well, I'll send you
Um,
an 8 by 10.
oh, thanks, Ken. You're so sweet. Nothing but the best from you, huh? And
Exactly,
I think I'm gonna
exactly.
need bigger than an 8 by 10. I think I want a 3 foot by 2 foot. That thing's gonna get framed right in my office.
but but all kidding aside, if we look at it from the standpoint of people who may be very excited about the prospect of working from home, but they haven't done this before, and it does take a little bit of extra discipline. I mean, and this isn't really a technology question, but it does take a little bit of extra discipline to work from home. From one long-term telecommuter to another, what do you see as kind of the best practices around getting work done in a situation where you're not used to this?
Oh gosh. There's quite a bit there. I think. Um, I think that there is really it does take discipline. So you have to I think the biggest most important thing is you have to know yourself. So the end of the day, you have to understand how you interact with your work. Are you the kind of person that needs to have your laptop ripped away from you at the end of the day? Or are you the kind of person that gets distracted by the squirrel running across your fence in the middle of it?
Mhm.
And that takes two different kinds of people and takes two different kinds of rails that you have to put up for yourself.
Right.
But in general, I think most people need some amount of discipline. And what that means is anything from, um, I've done quite a bit of coaching on this, is sometimes it means that you get up in the morning and you put on a suit and you enter a divided space that is your space for work, and the only thing that happens there is work.
Hmm.
If you have a family, if you have a dog, sometimes that means locking the door
Yep.
and putting a sign outside that says "Do not disturb." I do think it what it really means for management is a focus on results. You and I have talked about this, Ken. At the end of the day, what working from home means for us is so long as we get the job done, does it matter whether I'm in my sweats or laying on my couch? That focus on results to make sure that you are getting the result that you need,
Hmm.
for me at least, is the important part. Now, again, certain workplaces are going to want a lot more discipline and the results they want, they have to measure.
Right.
In a sales organization, it's fairly easy, right? With all of the UCAS, not all of, but the vast majority of UCAS systems, you have some sort of reporting that you can look at in there to see how many calls and how many connects and how long they were on the phone for and when those calls were made.
Hmm.
And you can bump that up against, okay, my employee reported X and Y and Z. And does that make sense? So you can manage to activity as well within it. But I guess my urge would be manage to results. And if the results don't seem to be happening, then manage to the individual behaviors within it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned UCAS just now, and you mentioned it before a little bit, and we had been talking about what it takes to make sure that you've got the necessary bandwidth at each of these locations to get done what you need to get done. So let's say that we've got the bandwidth stuff figured out, and that's all working, and that's all up, and everything's good. What are the main applications that need to be a part of that mix? And is there anything that most companies have typically left out along the way? UCAS being table stakes, I guess, and probably the most obvious one. But what do you see as the main applications that need to be there?
Well, look, I think there's one of two routes that you can take that I see personally. One is the route where you're going to virtualize everything and do desktop as a service. So really, and if you think of back to the old Citrix days, where really you're only looking at an image, to me that is the most secure and robust way of doing it, but it is also the more expensive way of doing it. The alternative is essentially a VPN based solution. So you're going to want to, at that point, Go to software as a service as much as you can. So you go to your O360, your Office 365s, you do Salesforce Online for for your CRM or whatever online CRM that you can, so you can access it via a web browser anywhere, and you're not taking up Office bandwidth. And what you're really trying to do is minimize the things that you need a true VPN to utilize. All those browser-based systems, they have SSL already built into them, so they are already secure innately. So the more you can offload at that point, and the less that you have, as I had an engineer who used to say some people love petting the box. Right? They have a box in their office and it's going to sit there, or they have a box in infrastructure as a service. They have an AS400 that you have to have. You cannot get rid of it. You can't virtualize it. The more you can do to get away from that, the better, because those are the things that are going to fail. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when. Um, so the more you can move into an as a service model, whether it's software as a service and you're using a browser based model, or desktop as a service and you're using, again, a browser based model. When you don't have the, the wrenches in your hands, basically you can still turn all the dials and you can turn them quickly and you can manage it and maintain it in any way you want, but you are now concentrated on your business instead of being concentrated on maintaining boxes and maintaining an infrastructure stack, or even maintaining a VMware stack. And as you get away from that, that really primes the pump to get you to a place where you can really take advantage of remote working and moving on the and working on the move.
What about speed to deployment? I mean, how quickly can you turn these things up, especially in an environment where a lot of people are coming at you at the same time saying, we want it now. How fast can you get it here?"
Ah, that, my friend, is a loaded question,
Hmm.
because there's best practices. And if you were a customer coming to me saying, "Hey, I'd really like this," I'd tell you, if you can give me 60 to 90 days, that's really best practices. And if we can get more towards the 90, I think everybody's happier and we can always reel it in.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're not going to get that kind of time though right now.
right now, you're not going to get that.
Right.
So that being said, for UCAS, you can get UCAS turned up like that. Literally, we can have a phone overnighted and have a customer built in a day. The caveat to that being porting numbers. So if you have existing numbers that you need moved over, that can, legally it can take up to a month. In general, it takes 5 to 10 days.
Hmm.
Now, in those 5 to 10 days, you can also forward that number over to your UCAS system. So you're still up and running, but you won't have 100% functionality and mobility with that number.
Okay.
So that's on the phone system side of it. On the connectivity side of it, if you're going with a DSL or a satellite or a coax, you're talking 5 business days. Generally, 5 to 10 is the number, assuming that it's already built in. If you are talking about desktop as a service, an application as a service, it's going to get a little more complicated. Can we do it in 2 weeks? Sure thing. Um, that being said, it's going to obviously depend on a whole host of factors, and the complications necessary with that are they're not insubstantial. Can we get a VPN running up on a laptop tomorrow? Probably. So there's a lot of moving dials on that one.
Basically, what I'm hearing you say is I can stand you up at a basic level pretty quickly. to get all the features stood up and running and fully integrated and optimized. That may take a little bit more time because part of that's out of my hands, especially with things like porting numbers and stuff like that. But I can
Exactly.
forward those calls and I can give you a basic level of connectivity that should get you through the short term. Does that summarize it well?
Absolutely. Phone system is easy. As you go up the stack, it gets more and more complicated. And if we're talking about something as simple as Office 365, you have a server and you have an XP server. Let's go with an XP server. Just hanging out there still.
Right.
We can get you on Office 365 very, very quickly. That movement is easy. When you start talking about custom apps and custom calls and custom databases, moving that to desktop as a service is a much more complicated conversation.
Yeah, I understand that. So let me ask you my big gotcha question. And I basically
Uh-oh.
ask this. Yeah, exactly. I ask this of everybody. What is it that you see as the big stumbling block? And in this case, we've been talking about stumbling blocks the whole time and what it takes to make things happen. But what is the thing that is most frequently left off the table in terms of the planning process of all this? What is it that they need to take a harder look at that they might not have even thought about?
Well, I mean, the first one that screams to me that I've seen most often is really check the internet. Check the internet, check the internet. Make sure you have something that's going to work there. Um, I can't tell you how many times I've been told by a customer, "Oh, no, 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 that's fine. I know he's got a great connection over there. Houston's fine, no biggie." And you get there and the connection is just not good enough to handle it. Now, we've come a long way and we can operate phones on some really terrible connections, but it's such a simple thing that I really think comes back to bite people in the butt more often than anything else that I've seen on the voice side. From the application side, I would say it's setting proper expectations. So, road warriors are a great example of this. I have a lot of customers that utilized DAS that wanted to use it for road warriors. Well, but if they're on a plane, they're not operating via DAS at that point. So you still need to have localized versions of everything right then and there. Now, certain things will work and certain things won't, but if you set proper expectations of this is what you can do and this is what you can't do, you can be very successful. If you just say everything's going to work and kind of cross your fingers and go, that's when the problems arise, in my experience. So communication and setting proper expectations, I think, and I would say that with almost any deployment, whether it's I need this next week or I need this in 6 months or this is incredibly complicated or as simple as it gets.
All right, Dan, thank you so much. I know you've got a lot of customers that are looking for your attention these days, so I'm very grateful that you've taken some time out to have this discussion with us. Dan Harrison, president of Upfront Technologies in Denver, Colorado. Thank you for being our guest today.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Avant Technology Insights with Ken Presti, featuring information and opinions on how key technologies can be leveraged to solve business problems. Avant Technology Insights is a service of Avant Communications, an IT decision-making platform for next-generation technologies. All opinions expressed are those of the guests and the host. For more information, please visit www.goavant.net. That's www.goav as in victory, ant.net. For Avant Research and Analytics, this is Ken Presti.